BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this special weekend episode of Black Box Online Radio. Today we're continuing with our discussions about the 1981 murder of Joan Webster from Boston, Massachusetts. And this is part of an ongoing series about the case, but if you haven't heard the previous episodes, now is a great time to just jump right into it, because today we're going to be examining a particular suspect in the murder of Joan Webster, and his name is Leonard Paradiso, someone who the prosecutor Tim Burke referred to as Boston's unknown serial killer. But did this man, Leonard Paradiso, actually murder Joan Webster and other people, or is there something else more mysterious going on? That will be the question that we will be exploring today. To provide an introduction to the subject, I would like to go to this article that was written in 2008 by Laurel Sweet, published in the Boston Herald. It is called Suspected Serial Killer Paradiso, Dead at 65. And yes, Leonard Paradiso passed away in 2008 from cancer. He was behind bars for the rest of his life. But let's read the introduction here. Leonard the Quahog Paradiso, a revered fisherman. One former homicide prosecutor is sure he got away with murder again and again. He died yesterday behind bars, and once again, 2008 is the time of this article. The first thing is, as far as serial killer nicknames go, the Quahog is as bad as it could possibly get, but I want to digress from that. He's taken a lot of secrets to the grave, said ex-prosecutor Tim Burke, who believes that Leonard Paradiso was responsible, although never charged with, the murders of half a dozen women between 1974 and 1981, including Harvard grad student Joan Webster. And the murders that he is talking about here involve the 1979 murder of Marie Iannuzzi, the 1975 deaths of Holly Davidson and Melody Stankiewicz, and the 1974 deaths of Lois Centofonte, Kim Benoit, and Kathy Williams. First, I think it's important to say a big rest in peace to the victims. I mean, no matter what, they did not deserve to end their lives like this, or to have their lives ended like this, to be clear. But Leonard Paradiso was not convicted for the murder of Joan Webster. And I really like the phrasing in this article here because, firstly, you heard the title, Suspected Serial Killer. And they did also point out how Tim Burke believes that Leonard Paradiso committed these murders. But what it really happened? The first point is that Leonard Paradiso was convicted for the 1979 murder of Marie Iannuzzi. Marie Iannuzzi was found strangled, and her body was dumped near a body of water. In some sources, it sounds like it's talking about the riverbank. In other sources, it's referred to as somewhat of a marshy area. But she was strangled with her own scarf tied in a double knot. There is another suspect in the murder of Marie Iannuzzi, and that is her own boyfriend at the time. And you can imagine something to the effect of a boyfriend and a girlfriend get into a heated argument. He strangles her with her own scarf, and then he called somebody in law enforcement, this is all hypothesizing, mind you, and said, things got out of control, something bad happened, I did something terrible, and then they needed a cover-up. They needed to have someone whom they could blame the crime on. But that still doesn't answer the question. Why Leonard Paradiso? Well, I've been corresponding with Eve Carson, who is the author of the book Mommy's a Mole, about the 1981 murder of her sister-in-law, Joan Webster. Eve Carson is Joan Webster's sister-in-law, and she has an attempt to answer the question about why would the district attorney's office as well as law enforcement, be trying to blame Leonard Paradiso for these murders if he didn't actually do them. And Eve writes, Paradiso had a rap sheet. He was not a saint. He was convicted and served time in jail in 1973 for assault. He was vulnerable to accusations. Patty Bono's accusations was a she-said story. We'll say something about her in just a second. Combining with unsubstantiated charges and the fact that Paradiso was implicated without evidence makes it not very credible. Rather, someone added to the dubious witness list and Burke brought forward to nail Paradiso. So, I think that you can see that there. We will hear a lot of things about the accusations against Leonard Paradiso, but right now I would like to go over to an article that was published on northendwaterfront.com, and this is a website that I had never heard before, but they actually have posted an article about Eve Carson's book, Mommy's a Mole, which is available on Amazon.com for purchase. And this article was written by Matt Conti, Conti, and this was published in 2014. Leonard Paradiso of the North End was known to residents of the community for pushing a cart and selling clams for many years at the festivals of patron saints. Paradiso was also known for his conviction of the 1979 murder of Marie Iannuzzi. He was also implicated by the authorities for the 1981 murder of Joan Webster. See, the phrasing is key. He was never convicted for the murder of Joan Webster, and there's a particular reason how we know that their story just doesn't exactly come together. Leonard Paradiso maintained his innocence in both crimes up until his death in 2008. And Eve Carson claims that she has recovered files that show how they were obsessed with an effort to incriminate Leonard Paradiso for numerous crimes. Records reflected the same misprison prevalent in Boston's broken system at the time of Joan's loss. Now there is someone who wants to respond to Eve Carson's accusations, and her name is Patty Bono, and she claims that Leonard Paradiso did indeed attack her, and these are the words of Patty Bono here, although she is using her married name. Bono was her maiden name, it appears. To Eve Carson, whoever you are, I am the woman who called the Saugus police. I sat there during that trial while 6 other women told chilling stories of their encounters with Leonard Paradiso. We are the women that got away alive. How could you bring back this pain into my life? And then Patty continues, I've never spoke to the Webster family on the phone. Sorry, I am still alive, and I am sure you are making up all these in your delusions. But then there is a response to this that is written by someone named Patrick King that I'll read in just a second. But it's important to note that what they were doing, the authorities that is that they're building the story around Leonard Paradiso that he is some type of out of control, very impulsive serial killer who may even have had connections to the mob. That is the angle that the DA is going to try and present. But this response that was written by Patrick King here says, hello to Miss Patty Bono, once again the person who accused Leonard Paradiso of both assault and sexual assault. I have read Timothy Burke's book, and I am now in the process of reading Eve Carson's book. Have you read them? I have no doubt that you experienced horrible circumstances as described in Mr. Burke's book, and that Leonard Paradiso was caught in the act of raping Connie Porter, and was no doubt guilty of raping other victims, of an opportunity of many of whom testified against him in his trial for the murder of Marie Iannuzzi. My problem with Tim Burke's book is that he describes how a district attorney created a case against a clearly unsavory citizen with no concrete evidence that he actually did the murder at all. Certainly Leonard Paradiso had proclivities that could graduate to murder, but in my opinion, none of the evidence introduced at court proved that Paradiso murdered Marie Iannuzzi. I think the likelihood that he abducted and murdered Joan Webster too is highly improbable. Paradiso was a scam artist. an insurance fraud, a liar, and a rapist, and that was amply proven in court. We cannot, however, make a leap into the abyss and say because he did these things that therefore he murdered Maria Iannuzzi. But Paradiso was convicted of that and did spend the rest of his life in prison. While I'm not sad to see him gone, yeah, I'm not really sad either. I mean, you heard all those horrible crimes that he did commit, but proof there is no justice in the world. However, a person, however unsavory, is convicted of a crime, and the right person still walks the streets among us. But that's the whole problem, though, and I think that's why Eve Carson is so outraged by what happened. If Paradiso did not murder Maria Iannuzzi and did not murder Joan Webster, well, then that would mean that the real killers would have gone free. There are a number of problems with the idea that Paradiso abducted and murdered Joan Webster. Back to Patrick King's comment here. The first red flag to me is that Joan Webster is from a completely different socioeconomic group than any of his other victims. Oh, that one doesn't actually stand out a lot to me. What I think is more, the bigger red flag I noticed is that Joan Webster flew into Logan Airport in Boston, Massachusetts. She's supposed to get into a taxi, but then at the last minute, some person with curly hair and a very disheveled beard and a pair of glasses approaches her, someone who was not very well dressed either. He then convinces Joan Webster to come with him in his car, and she was never seen alive again. So that I don't really think is too far a stretch. I mean, obviously, the district attorneys were trying to say that Paradiso was acting as an opportunistic serial killer who then lured Joan Webster back to his boat. And the line about insurance fraud in here is that Leonard Paradiso owned a boat, and he intentionally broke the rudder in the summer of 1981. It's actually in the month of July, I believe. So the boat sank in the summer, and then the whole of law enforcement, everybody was trying to say that Paradiso had lured Joan Webster onto his boat and that he had murdered her, sexually assaulted her, and then buried her body at sea. But the boat was already underwater at the time, and it wasn't raised again until 1983. If I've got that, you're correct. Now let's go back to Patrick King's comment here. What we know about serial offenders, rapists, and murderers is that their crimes are inspired by a certain type of person. I mean, a certain type of person, though, I have to throw in another interjection. That isn't always about socioeconomic status. I mean, it could be the way that they look. It could be a certain body type. I really don't think that that is 100% necessary, and nor did Patrick say that in this comment here, but let's just keep going. Webster was not the type to inflame the rage that made Paradiso rape, much less murder, and there is no credible evidence that puts Paradiso at Logan Airport with access to a taxicab on the night of the crime. All of this is Tim Burke's speculation. I completely agree that they just created this case based on speculation. They were trying to create this attractive narrative for the general public and the members of the jury. But as far as operating a taxicab, they were suggesting that that Leonard Paradiso would have approached Joan Webster as a gypsy cab, excuse me, I don't really like that expression, or even to say a black taxi cab. We can just say approaching her as an illegal taxi driver and then offering her a low discount rate or something like that. But Eve Carson said very clearly that Joan Webster was a 25-year-old woman. She wasn't just going to accept a ride from a stranger who was not even driving a real taxi cab. That's why Eve Carson suggests that Joan Webster almost certainly would have known the person who would have taken her in that car. And I'll go back to Patrick's comment. The fact that Mr. Burke makes no reference to the work that George and Eleanor Webster did in his entire book is a problem for me. This seems like a cover-up, and I thought it was a cover-up before I have ever heard of Eve Carson and her book. I was inspired to look further into the Paradiso case, because frankly, Mr. Burke's case feels like an agenda to rush to judgment. I'm finding Miss Carson's book very thought-provoking, and it does come across as paranoid, but if half of what she thinks is happening is true, she has good reason to be. Just because one person is paranoid doesn't mean that people still may be able to get something out of them. She certainly gives Paradiso more of the benefit of the doubt than I think he's worthy of, but I'm convinced he's guilty. I am not convinced he's guilty as charged. And thank you to Patrick King for that comment. Once again, this was posted on northendwaterfront.com. I correspond frequently with Eve Carson about the murder of Joan Webster, and I don't think I have ever once would have called her paranoid. Instead, I think she has a theory about what happened. She is trying to make a case for what happened, and she also has lots of evidence to back up her findings about how the authorities were trying to blame Paradiso unjustly for the murders of Marie Iannuzzi and Joan Webster. In short, she makes the bold claim he did not commit those crimes. And, I mean, I think you heard in Patrick's comment there, he was an unsavory citizen, Leonard Paradiso, that is, someone who committed a lot of crimes, whether it's insurance fraud by sinking his own boat, or rape, or physical abuse toward women. All of those things are absolutely heinous. But does that mean that he murdered Joan Webster or Marie Iannuzzi? Comparing the different narratives, I definitely find the ex-boyfriend narrative much more compelling in the case of Marie Iannuzzi, that he would be a much more likely suspect, as well as someone who would have had the connection to law enforcement, who would have helped them dump the body. And I can't prove that in a court of law, but when you hear the narratives side by side, as opposed to somebody like Leonard Paradiso, who is he knew Marie Iannuzzi, but it appears he did not have a connection to Joan Webster. Another piece of evidence that was brought in was the testimony of somebody who was named Charlene Bullerwell. Charlene Bullerwell is also someone who came forward to try and implicate Paradiso in the murders, and I would like to go to a message that was written to me by Eve Carson, and one more time, the title of her book is Mommy's a Mole, about all of this. But what she says about Charlene Bullerwell is, Tim Burke claims that Charlene Bullerwell was the witness that helped them locate Paradiso's boat in the harbor. They didn't identify her until a week after the boat came up, meaning Tim Burke's story is false. Tim Burke claimed that Paradiso went berserk, slamming her against the wall, screaming at her to shut up. He claimed the second time she got on the boat with her son, he ended up ramming cars on the dock. I can't imagine anyone getting onto a boat with someone who claimed they were a hitman for the mob or acted in the way that was described, let alone with her son. Burke's story is completely the opposite of the relationship that Charlene Bullerwell testified to. They had consensual intimacy, no force or threats. He claimed she looked like Joan. Far from it. She was tall and slender and blonde. She had dyed red hair by the time she ended up on the stand. And Joan Webster, of course, as you can see, was clearly a brunette. But from this whole thing about being a hitman for the mob, they created this whole angle that Leonard Paradiso liked murdering women and that he would like to tie cinder blocks to the female bodies and throw them into the water, and that's what most likely happened to Joan. It's possible that whoever was actually responsible for Joan Webster's murder was expecting that her remains would never have been found inland, but Joan was found buried on a place called Tobacco Road in Massachusetts. Her body had been placed into a trash bag. She had been stripped naked, but by that time, it was nearly 10 years after she had been murdered. Her remains were found from 1981 to 1990. Really, it's just south of 9 years. But she still had her jewelry on, because they also tried to make the case that Leonard Paradiso had stolen Joan Webster's jewelry and given it to a woman. But no, Joan Webster still had her jewelry on when her body was discovered. So they did not like the guy. He was someone who wouldn't be missed if he did get sent to jail. It appears he was also someone who committed an enormous amount of other crimes, as we said, ranging from insurance fraud to rape. But Leonard Paradiso does not seem extraordinarily guilty of the murder of Joan Webster or the murder of Marie Iannuzzi. But I'll say it again, though, he was not convicted of the murder of Joan Webster, and there's a reason for that. As I've been learning more about the true crime world, sometimes you'll encounter cases where someone is a strong suspect, but they are not convicted. Now, why would that be? Well, a possibility that is explored in this narrative surrounding the Paradiso files or just anything to do with the murder of Joan Webster is her case remains unsolved. Because if somebody were to be convicted for the murder of Joan Webster, then people would be trying much harder to overturn the conviction, or they would try to examine the evidence much more closely. But if the crime remains unsolved, then that type of attention and focus will not happen. So many people are thinking that this is just something that happens not only with the murder of Joan Webster, not only in the state of Massachusetts, but all throughout the entire country, if not the world, where they may have a strong suspect. They might even know who the killer is, but that person doesn't get arrested because that could create a host of other legal issues, or it could also jeopardize another investigation. It could jeopardize confidential informants in a different part of the legal system. So the DA's office or law enforcement, I mean, I don't even want to start blaming anybody or accusing any specific branch or person at this point, but they might have a motivation to keep the crime unsolved. Just let it turn into a cold case, let amateur sleuths talk about it on the internet. But if somebody is not convicted, then that person's attorneys can't challenge the conviction and actually try and reveal the evidence that would implicate and possibly even convict a real murderer if it was that damning. Now, I think I should just say a couple things about the murder of Joan Webster, in addition to Leonard Paradiso, because Joan Webster is also connected to the Zodiac Killer mystery. And no, of course, I don't believe Leonard Paradiso was the Zodiac Killer. In fact, I think that he committed lots of crimes, but I don't think that he even committed the two major murders that we've been exploring in this series, the murder of Maria Iannuzzi and the murder of Joan Webster. About the Zodiac Killer connection to Joan Webster, there is this possibility that it was a man named Michael O'Hare, and there's also the possibility that it was someone named Gareth Penn, the author of the book Time 17, the researcher that went on to become the suspect. The more I learn about Gareth Penn, the more I think that I understand him, but I might be completely wrong. I'm not a mind reader, I'm not a psychic. But Joan Webster's disappearance was very widely publicized back at the time, and Eve Carson even shared some documents with me that I was reading through that was talking about the enormous amount of media attention that was surrounding Joan Webster's murder. And I began to really wonder how closely Gareth Penn would have followed that. Now, there is a document that was mailed called the Santa Claus card, which could have connected the Zodiac Killer to the murder of Joan Webster. But when I said I could understand the thinking process of Gareth Penn, maybe I could understand it, he needed a suspect. And his suspect, Michael Henry O'Hare, seemed to fit all of the boxes, even to the fact that Michael O'Hare has a degree in architecture. Joan Webster was an architecture student. Michael O'Hare went to Harvard. Joan Webster was going to Harvard. And Gareth Penn's theory is all about how there are two important numbers in the Zodiac Killer mystery, 17 and 38. 38 was an old zoning code for Cambridge, where Harvard is, and even the zip code for Cambridge, Massachusetts, one of them anyway, is 02138. To this day, of course, there are some other zip codes in Cambridge, 02139, for example. But I just seem to notice that O'Hare was just somebody who fit like a glove in Gareth Penn's theory. He was the suspect that Gareth Penn found who just fit all of the parameters, and Gareth Penn probably thought that he was the exact find. However, Michael O'Hare is also someone who most likely was not the Zodiac Killer, because his own defense was he thinks he wasn't even in California in 1968 and 69, or in California at the time of the murders. So that's a strike against him. And with Gareth Penn, he is someone who is perhaps closely following the media coverage surrounding Joan Webster. But did he actually go to Massachusetts and murder Joan Webster? That would be very difficult for him to have abducted her from the airport. As we said, someone whom she was completely unfamiliar with, unless he had some type of pre-established relationship with Joan Webster. But that's just guesswork. That's just speculation. Did any of that actually happen? And as you can see, I don't believe there was a strong connection between the murder of Joan Webster and the Zodiac killer, nor do I believe that there was a strong connection between the I was about to say the serial killer Leonard Paradiso. Well, let's just say the criminal Leonard Paradiso and Joan Webster, as well as Maria Iannuzzi. And the final thing to say is Tim Burke is the author of the book, The Paradiso Files, and you've been seeing his image going up and down on the screen. But Tim Burke was someone whom in 1980 received his first case. He started out very young. He was still a very green prosecutor at the time. And, I mean, Eve Carson even sent me a message questioning about, like, now, why would they go through with somebody like that? It's possible that somebody like Tim Burke wanted to make a name for himself. I mean, I don't think even Tim Burke would dispute that he wanted to make a name for himself using the Paradiso trial. I mean, he even went on to write a book about it. But also, because of his inexperience, he was in a position in which he could be manipulated. And they may have even had some type of dirt on him. But that's getting into some other guesswork, well, on my part. Because sometimes with these high-profile cases, and as we said, Joan Webster's disappearance received a lot of media coverage. Eve Carson also likes to say that it was mentioned frequently in the tabloids. I mean, the media zoned in on this. And so, I mean, first the media zones in on it, then Gareth Penn zones in on it. But someone like Tim Burke wants to make a name for himself, and he may have been given this high-profile thing because they did have some dirt on him. Always going to put that on the table, because that's what is frequently done. A prime example of this is the prosecutor Vincent Bugliosi, who was involved with Manson's Helter Skelter, and Tom O'Neill dug up all kinds of things. I mean, when I said Bugliosi is more involved in Manson's Helter Skelter, he was the co-author of the book Helter Skelter, the most successful true crime book of all time, the lead prosecutor in the Manson trial. Tom O'Neill was the author of the book Chaos, which wanted to highlight a lot of the inaccuracies in the Charles Manson story, but one of the points that he showed was Vincent Bugliosi had all kinds of criminal actions of his own. He was also a very inexperienced prosecutor, and here's the commonality between somebody like him and somebody like Tim Burke. If it blows up, well, this prosecutor is expendable, someone whom they can just sweep away. If it blows up, then, well, this is someone that is kind of on the fence anyway. They're just going to get pushed to another side of the fence. That's what could have happened, possibly. And I do think there is a certain value in discussing these theories online because it is theoretical. And I can't walk into a court of law and prove that beyond a reasonable doubt tomorrow that this is everything that happened. But when you listen to the different sides of the story and you try to say, does this version make sense or not, I really have to conclude, as of now, always open to changing my mind, that Leonard Paradiso most likely did not murder Maria Iannuzzi or Joan Webster. In fact, almost certainly did not murder Joan Webster because, as we said, she was not killed on his boat that was already underwater at the time. She was not buried at sea. Her body was discovered on land. And here's some things from the previous episodes. Eve Carson uncovered documentation that the investigating officers knew the correct manner of Joan's death 7 years prior to the discovery of her remains. And she was also murdered by blunt force trauma, as well as her items were taken and scattered, and they found, I was just reading in one source that they found Joan's purse, I believe it was, very close to where Maria Iannuzzi's body was dumped. So some people are trying to say, haha, they're already thinking about framing Paradiso for that. But that's all of those things are pointing against Paradiso and towards somebody else. Okay, thank you for listening to this discussion here on Leonard Paradiso as an alleged serial killer, but a lot of that seems to be lost to time. and we might never get the exact questions about all the crimes that he committed. One more time, you can find the books The Paradiso Files and Mommy's a Mole by Tim Burke and Eve Carson, respectively, on Amazon.com, as well as visiting countless sources on the internet and all following along with Black Box Online Radio. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for listening to this episode, and if you like what you hear, you can hit the like button, but most importantly, please put some comments in the section below so we can continue the discussion. I will see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast, and anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. There's also my Facebook page that has been posted in the description box. Okay, and until next time.